In 1290, after years of crippling taxation and persecution, the entire Jewish population was expelled from England by order of King Edward I. They emigrated to various parts of Europe, including countries such as Poland that protected them by law. However, this treatment was not limited to English Jews. In 1492, after a century of persecution, the Jewish population of Spain was expelled, and 5 years after that it was the turn of the Portuguese Jews to suffer the same fate. In the pogroms of the 1390s, Iberian rulers had forced the Jews to convert to Catholicism or be executed for heresy. Some had converted, and others had pretended to and continued to practice Judaism in secret. These were known as conversos or Marranos. The original purpose of the Spanish Inquisition was to ensure that these conversos were now true Catholics and not secretly practicing Judaism. I think it's particularly ironic that the notorious head of the Inquisition, a monk called Torquemada, was also from a family of early conversos and so was originally Jewish. After their expulsion from Spain and Portugal, many went to Amsterdam, which was an important centre of Jewish life and a major trading town. Here some were able to practice their Judaism openly, whilst others remained, as it were, undercover. Some of these, calling themselves Spanish merchants, came to transact business in England, which following the Civil War was now a commonwealth, with Oliver Cromwell as their Lord Protector. In 1654, a trade war broke out with Spain under King Philip IV. The goods of a Spanish merchant called Antonio Robles was seized. He, at this point, requested to be classified as a Jew rather than a Spaniard, and therefore his goods were returned. Cromwell was sympathetic to the Jewish cause, partly because of his tolerance, but mainly because he saw the importance for English commerce of the participation of Jewish merchants, some of whom had already made their way to London. Following the 80 Years' War, Holland had recently broken from the Spanish Empire, and Cromwell realised if he could play on the Dutch antipathy to Spain, it would encourage more trade and this would be good for the English economy. In 1655, Manasseh ben Israel, a Portuguese rabbi living in Amsterdam, came to England to argue the case for the Jews to be readmitted to the country. A conference was held in Whitehall in December 1655 to discuss the matter. At this, it was agreed that as the expulsion had originally been by royal decree and not by formal parliamentary action, there was no law which forbade the Jews to return to England. So although nothing was formally enacted, the door was opened for the Jews to gradually return to the country. Another recently emergent Jew, Antonio Fernandez Carvajal, leased land on Creechurch Lane in the City of London for a synagogue in 1657. This remained the focal point of London Jews for the next 44 years. On the 14th of October 1663, the diarist Samuel Pepys visited the synagogue on Simchas Torah, and he recorded his impressions of the visit. He said, "They take their laws out of the press and carry it about the room whilst such a service is singing. But Lord, to see the disorder, laughing, sporting, and no attention but confusion and noise in all their service." I think a few people might recognise that description. In 1688, the Catholic King James II fled the country, leaving the way open for his Protestant daughter Mary and her husband William to take the throne in what was called the Glorious Revolution. Their arrival from Holland was funded by Jewish bankers who had helped William throughout his career, the main one being a man called Francisco Lopez Soasso. He not only lent William huge amounts of money, but arranged to provide mercenary troops to back up the invasion, if necessary. This relationship encouraged more of the Dutch Sephardi community to come to England, and in 1701 a new synagogue was opened in Bevis Marks, a short street near the Creechurch Lane Synagogue. It was common in those days for synagogues to be designed to be similar to the churches used by the local population, so as not to stand out from the crowd too much. Here you see synagogues in Verona, in Budapest and in Prague, which apart from Jewish and Hebrew iconography might easily be churches. And this philosophy applied when designing the Bevis Marks Synagogue in London. It was designed by a Puritan called Joseph Avis, and it resembles many of the nonconformist churches that were being built by Christopher Wren and others in the aftermath of the Great Fire of London. It is classical in style, and the women's gallery above is supported by 12 columns representing the 12 tribes of Israel. There are also 7 large chandeliers representing the days of the week, with the largest chandelier representing the Shabbat. The wooden ark resembles a reredos, or ornamental altar screen. The doors of the ark are oak, grained to look like mahogany, and the interior is lined with Spanish gilded leather. The synagogue has been in constant use since 1701 and is still virtually unchanged. In 1787, a special seat was made for this man, Sir Moses Montefiore, one of the most famous of all English Jews. He had made a huge fortune on the stock market by the age of 40, and he spent the next 60 years of his life in works of philanthropy. He married the sister-in-law of this man, Nathan Meyer Rothschild, head of the English branch of a wealthy German banking family. The brothers-in-law became business partners, investing in supply of piped gas for the street lighting to European cities, and in 1824 founding the Alliance Life Assurance Company, which later merged to become the Sun Alliance Company. Entry to the higher echelons of politics was difficult for Jews at this time because a mandatory oath of office had to be taken, which included Christian statements of faith. Sir David Salomons was elected to various high offices, but was unable to take up his positions because of these oaths. Due to his efforts, however, he was eventually elected Sheriff of the City of London, an Alderman of the City of London, and eventually Lord Mayor of London. His actions led to a number of law reforms which allowed entry for Jews to Oxford and Cambridge, and eventually to Parliament as well. Benjamin Disraeli was already an MP, but he had converted to Christianity at the age of 12, so he was able to take the appropriate oath, as had a few others before him, notably a man called Samson Gideon in 1770. However, in 1858, Lionel Rothschild, nephew of Nathan Rothschild, became the first MP to legally take his seat in the House of Commons. In 1865, Lionel's son, another Nathan Rothschild, sat in the House of Commons as Liberal Member of Parliament for Aylesbury. Father and son were MPs together from 1865 to 68 and from 1869 to 74. In 1885, this Nathan Rothschild became a member of the House of Lords when he was created Baron Rothschild of Tring in the county of Hertford. Until this time, all Jewish MPs were members of the Liberal Party, but this man, Saul Isaac, he was the first Jew to be elected to the House of Commons as a Conservative candidate. Another first was Sir George Jessel, one of the most influential judges of his time. He was Master of the Rolls and the first Jew to be a regular member of the Privy Council and to hold high judicial office. The 1880s saw tremendous upheaval in Eastern Europe and mass pogroms aimed at the Jewish population in Russia. This led to mass emigration from these areas, mainly to America and also to England, some people arriving in England thinking that they had arrived in America. One of these immigrants was a Michael Marks, who arrived from what is now Belarus. He started by opening a market stall in Leeds, which was called the Penny Bazaar, with the motto, "Don't ask the price, it's a penny." In 1894, he needed someone to go into business with, and he chose a man called Tom Spencer, who was a local person. And together, they went on to form one of the most recognisable brands in the British High Street, going from this to this throughout the entire nation. Moshe Osinski, a Lithuanian immigrant, arrived in England with nothing more than ambition. He became a peddler selling door to door before spotting a gap in the market for cheap clothing for working men. He borrowed £100 to open a shop, moved to Sheffield and changed his name to Montague Burton. And the rest, as they say, is history. Lucrative military orders in the First World War led to rapid expansion, and by 1925 he was running the largest clothing factory in the world. Isaac Wolfson was born in Glasgow, the son of a Polish immigrant. His businesses grew with the times, from mail order to companies which embrace modern technology and modern marketing techniques. He was a great philanthropist and the only non-religious figure to have a college named after him at both Oxford and Cambridge. Although not as numerous as in America, many Jewish people have found their way into the world of entertainment. Nat Cohen and Stuart Levy founded Anglo Amalgamated Pictures. Among other things, brought the Carry On films to our screens, for better or for worse. Ealing Studios became a byword for top-class British comedy. This was headed by Sir Michael Balcon, and films were produced which are still regarded as classics of their type. These are two examples. Alma Cogan was an enormously popular entertainer in the 50s and 60s. She died from cancer at a very young age. Amy Winehouse, looking here like a modern version of Alma Cogan, also died tragically young. The world of theatre, both popular and classical, has many famous Jewish faces in its ranks. And although the Jewish population of Britain is small, at around 260,000, it is very well integrated. However, increasing global right-wing nationalism and xenophobia shows itself in attacks on many minority groups, and of course with many centuries of persecution behind them, the Jews remain an easy target. There is also a lot of confusion between Zionism, Judaism and the State of Israel. Let us end with the positive thoughts and words of Manasseh ben Israel, who was so instrumental in re-establishing the Jewish community in England in the 17th century. It may be seen that God has not left us, for if one persecutes us, another receives us civilly and courteously. And if this prince treats us ill, another treats us well. And do we not see that those republics do flourish and much increase in trade who admit the Israelites? So nothing much has really changed.